Hey Alpha fam, welcome back to another episode of Alpha Commission. Today I want to show you a couple just very interesting things that I'm just looking at right now that might blow your mind a little bit. This stuff is just things that you won't be seeing on other channels. I promised you, I am a lateral thinker. I'm not a serial thinker, and so while some of these episodes, may go step by step, and a lot of the YouTubers that you watch, often, give you, specific measurements here or there. That's not really my expertise. I'm a sideways thinker. I don't think just step by step. I try to look at the big picture. I'm not looking at small 5-minute moves. I'm looking at weekly moves, monthly moves, and we just want to get a feel for the kind of macro, those type of medium time frames, and a few bucks here and there don't really matter. If you're scalping, of course, this might be a little bit frustrating, but in terms of the big moves, we've been doing it pretty good here, so bear with me. But the first thing that I want to just point out to you, because I'm always trying to give you a different perspective on, the market. I just want to show you something that's very interesting. If we take some type of a fractal here, just from the previous summer, and I want to show you something when we overlay it, onto the current price action. Well, some people can say there's a vague similarity, right? But doesn't something strike you a little bit odd? Doesn't this appear to be backwards? Right? This is backwards. And I've already talked about Z patterns in the past, but let's just take a look at this and see what we can do with it, right? Let's just mirror it, maybe flip it, just see what we can do, right, with this price action. Okay, here we go. So if we flip this, so now it doesn't look like the original anymore. But you might notice it's starting to look very similar to our current price action, right? There is some type of family relationship going on here. And whether or not it's perfect, because that doesn't really matter, right? We're just trying to get an idea for the price action and the psychology of this market. If we take this fractal and we approximate it as much as we can, let me kind of zoom in here a bit because I haven't done this yet. It's just something that I noticed and I decided to explore with you, right? So let's just take this and kind of get it in there. Yep. And look at this. Look at this price action. Isn't that fascinating? I find this almost mind-blowing, okay? If you were looking, if you were looking for this price action to capitulate, what if we already have, but in reverse? And then here's the spike up, and we're getting this chop up, right? So I just want you guys to think about this. If we are playing out this fractal of this price action, but it's in reverse, then where does that price action lead? It leads up, right? I'm not trying to get you super bullish or anything, right? I'm just saying that if we're having a rewind of summer, then that's very interesting, isn't it? Go ahead and leave me a like or a comment or something if you like this type of content. If you don't like this type of content, also please let me know. But I'm doing my best to try to think out of the box for you guys, and I have never seen anyone point this out. So, here I am doing it for you. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this is an interesting confluence for a possible pop upwards. Now, we also have to think, what is the opposite, possibility? What is the opposite possibility? And that got me to thinking, well, let's look at some of these other price actions. Because this also looks sort of like this price action, doesn't it? Well, yeah, it does, but there's two big distinctions. Can you notice them? One, this is leading down and this is leading down, right? So we might think, oh, well, if the body of this price action, basically our setup over here, if that price action is leading us downward here, like if we have a very similar price action and it leads us downward, then couldn't that suggest a huge drop, just like right here? And I would just say that the fractal would suggest not. Because in this case, we were coming up and then we recovered those candles going down, right? So we were coming up and then we went down. But in this case, right, in the fractal that we're using and in our current situation, we were coming down and then we end up recovering the candles up. Is this guaranteed? No, right? There's no guarantee about that. But same thing with this area over here, right? We were coming up, and that's why we ended up falling off. You could say that this fractal also is very similar to the top of this mountain, right? Very similar. Just this shoulder is just a bit lower, right? But a huge difference. Popping up, and then we fall down. In this case, falling down and pop up. Falling down, it suggests that we're gonna pump up, okay? And also, look at this, right? This price action right here looked suspiciously similar to this price action in the summer. Is it any coincidence that we drove all the way down here and like pulled? No, because we popped up significantly. Like we drove way down below this price action, right? This price action stopped in the main body. This price action went way below. And so from the perspective of this price action, and this is the best probably example of a breaking of this fractal, but if you take it with a grain of salt and you just consider that, okay, we got to that price action, so yeah, we were coming down, but in fact, we went way further down. And so, in fact, we were coming up before we put in this price action, right? And so we recovered it down. And we did. We almost recovered this same length down, right? So this length down, recovered up. This length up, recovered down. This length down, this length up because we hit a bottom. This length up, we recovered down, right? This length down, we might just recover it up. That's all I'm saying. And that would bring us to a $50,000 region, okay? And same thing here, right? Up, down, okay? So I'm just thinking that if this market does have a psychology, if it has bots, if it has specific traders who have been trading it for a very long time, for years, and they're set in their ways. Certain things trigger them to do certain things. They get influenced by certain fib levels. They get, influenced by certain EMA crossings. They get influenced by all these very specific factors, and then it creates a psychology. And this psychology, if we are, thinking laterally, if we're thinking out of the box, if we're not just so focused on the 5 minute that we don't see the big picture, we can consider that these psychologies might be playing out in very specific ways. And I just want you to refer to my, the hyper bullish case for crypto video that I made, because in the last half of that video, I did outline how we could pop up and potentially play out a fractal of this first zone in reverse. And if you take a look at that, I think you're going to be surprised at what is possible in Bitcoin. Now, does that mean that we're not going to, crash down if, if the stock market crashes, or if there's a global recession, or if there's a nuclear war? No, no, no. I'm just saying that this market is as poised to take off as it is to potentially pop down on the instability of other factors. And so if this was the bottom, we have a little bit of confluence to suggest that. And I don't really trust anybody who says, who just bought the bottom without having any type of a logic. And obviously, there's the expression, scared money don't make money, right? And I respect guys, who are able to, hold it together and or maybe have developed a great instinct for things, and they can take those risks in a calculated way where it's not going to, severely impact their portfolio. And then, if they take that risk, because let's be honest, right? Let's just be honest. You see this distance right here? Let me go ahead and make that white so it kind of stands out a bit more. See this distance right here? Very similar. Well, let's just take it at the bottom here. Very similar to this distance. 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 You see where I'm going with this, right? Very similar with this distance. Very similar with this distance. And if we have a pop-up, I mean, I don't know if we measure from down here or where, but if we have a pop-up and get to those mid 50s, it's going to be very similar, right? I mean, we would just expect that it would be. We would expect that it would be. And if we pop down, then, we might expect something similar as well, which would be like that 28K, region. And while people may be making predictions about, 40% pops up or 40% pops down, uh, it looks like Bitcoin likes to consolidate a little bit. It only has a certain amount of energy. Pardon me. It only has a certain amount of energy that it can burn through before, the bots and the old traders and the institutions and whatever psychology starts kicking in and people start reacting, right? And so even when you look at these, these these drives down, they often have consolidation points in the middle, all right? They often have consolidation points in the middle. And I know there's good technical, trading reasons for this, but and how people want to liquidate those who are trading certain levels and whatnot. But that just adds to what I'm saying, which is that we can probably expect this, this type of a distance to be playing out. And so if we do see the mid 50,000s, don't be surprised. If we see 28,000, don't be surprised, right? That's that's where we are right now, right? That's what we're doing. Like we're in between these two zones, playing this approximate field. And I have a bias upward right now because I told you I was a little bit over bullish in this area, even giving calls when I probably shouldn't have because, well, I mean, we had confirmation of support, so it was probably okay. It was good. It's just well, maybe you know what? Maybe those were the right calls, to be honest. And I'm just trying to not be egotistical about any of this. I'm presenting information just primarily for entertainment and amusement. But, if anybody can use this in their trading, then, more power to you and, good luck, sirs, right? But, I really don't want to be giving you guys any financial advice or any calls like that. So if that ever comes up, please just understand I'm just having a conversation with myself, right? I'm recording this in a room by myself. And so I'm just thinking out loud. And so this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm thinking right now, that based upon this fractal being the reverse of the last summer, being it very similar to the top of this mountain, but opposite energy, opposite momentum, right? Directional momentum is opposite. Then we would suggest that this is going to play out instead of a U here, a U here, all right? Because we don't have legs up, we have legs down, right? On this formation. And we're going to have legs up here if this fractal is playing out similar to the summer. Likewise, just like this, right? Legs up. Now, if that doesn't blow your mind, then maybe the next thing will. And I'm not sure if I should just stop here, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and instead of making a separate video, just go ahead and do this second part. Hopefully you stick with me. I know attention span on YouTube isn't that high, but appreciate those who do stick by. You guys may remember that I drew out these radials previously, right? I love radials. I love diagonals. I love origin lines. I love anti-origin lines. I love figuring out the diagonals and the fractals and the patterns. Okay, it's just something that my mind loves to do. And so you can really see at a glance that this was, in fact, you know, this in fact played out. I mean, this played out better than most horizontals play out. If you imagine that these are horizontals, this is exactly ideal what you would want to see in horizontals. But the diagonals were perfect, right? They didn't skip a beat. They were perfect. Whereas the horizontals missed things all over the place and just it's completely scatterbrained on the horizontals. Like, not, how many levels do you have here, right? On horizontals, you have so many levels on horizontals if you're playing these. But if you see it as I see it on these diagonals in these channels, and often forming radials, then you'll just see the absolute elegant beauty of how this music moves on basically, this music paper, this score here. And of course it breaks down, right? Because it can only be compressed so far. But and then you may ask, well, what comes next, right? What comes next, guy? Well, I'll show you. I'll show you. First of all, you know, these diagonals still remain intact, right? Because we still have the force of these diagonals still pushing us along. And you can see they absolutely hit in beautiful areas here, right? So it's almost like you're looking at a 3D landscape when you look at these, radials along with the diagonals. But your radials only last so long until you get so vertical. People are wondering why, why were we getting these huge vertical pumps? Well, we were getting trapped within these radials. We were crossing these main supports, these main support and resistances on this radial. And so as we crossed those main supports or the midlines, we have huge pumps and they line up with each other, right? It doesn't look like they line up if you're thinking horizontally. It doesn't look like they line up, right? Like you can't see this. You don't see anything lining up here. But for the radials, you can absolutely see how this lined up just perfectly with this one, right? And of course, it's contracting the further it goes along a radial because obviously that's what a radial is, right? And so what comes next? Well, check this out. And this is going to blow your mind, right? We've started a new one. And where does it begin? Literally, literally where this last one is ending, okay? Literally where the last one is ending, the new radial is beginning. So let me turn off this one because although we can interpret the intersection of these things, I just want to simplify it. I'm not getting all the middle supports and all the middle resistances. I'm just showing you the major ones. But how does this chart converge this way? What mathematical pressures are making it almost go backwards in time, right? It's almost going backwards in time, so that all this price action is radiating towards this spot, as if it knew this spot would exist in advance. Is that an algorithm? Is that bots? Mathematics is independent of time, so is it just a mathematical coincidence? Well, let me show you something. This this is all connected. This is all connected. Our price movement right now is connected to this radial, and these radials were formed at the origin of this capitulation, right? And maybe if we go back further, look at that. Look at that right here. Look at that. Right? I mean, it's not exact. They're humans trading this. This is Coinbase. Every exchange is going to be slightly different in their price action. But look at that, right? It's supported here. This is where it got rejected from. And I don't know, just the bottom, of this dump, right? And I'm probably getting misaligned somewhere around here. But look, even this wick right here, right? And so, when you think about these type of origin lines and you think about these type of radials that come off of them, and then you think about how it intersects with, different, diagonals, then we can kind of understand where price action might be going and how extreme it's turning. Well, one thing that you can imagine is it's turning extreme again. It's turning extreme again. And so just like we had huge spike ups, when we had these radials, right? We had these huge pumps when we were crossing the different channels. And then also when individual channels, sub-channels got really tight, they pumped all the way up because it was just basically vertical, right? In the diagonal, in the radial. Well, just like that happened, we're starting to see it again, right? We're starting to see it again, where we're pumping through these things, and there might be a better time scale, might be like the daily or something. You can almost see like it started here and it pumped all the way through this one. Started here, pumped, basically to this one. Started here, pumped to this one. And so what could happen is that potentially we could have, we could get to this point where we're making basically vertical radials, and then, we're just going to be able to make a vertical pump basically, right? And you could find out that you were left behind, okay? That you were left behind because this thing can just pump straight up, right? It can just pump straight up through one of these radials. And either crossing, from top to bottom, support to resistance, or, just pumping, right? Just pumping straight up in one of these more vertical lines. So it's just food for thought. I'm not sure what the tightening represents, but let me give you some hypothesis. When all these radials tighten together, and I've already demonstrated, let me get on a different time span. I've already demonstrated that they act as support and resistances, okay? So if they are support and resistances, then that should suggest it's very difficult to break through them. And where two of them overlap, it should be even more difficult to break through them. Okay? Like when we had our horizontals lining up with these diagonals and radials, that's almost always where something bounced. Look at this. There's a radial here, and then there's a radial here. And so look where it bounced. Look, look how perfect this is. I didn't even notice that. Look how perfect that is. It bounced off of the double radial. This radial and this one originating from a totally different spot. That's exactly where it bounced from. And look at this interplay right here. It fell precisely to that radial. Look where it gravitated to and used as support to launch to the next one, where it interacted right here. These are just radials interacting. They're not horizontals. They're just radials interacting. And I haven't even aligned this I haven't even like tediously aligned this. This is just subtly aligned. But look at this predictive move just using the double support of the main radials, right? And so if they act like support, right? Support, support and resistance basically, right? Support, resistance, whatever you want to call it, Then if price action came down here, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to bounce off. If it comes back down, it's going to bounce off. If it comes back down, it's going to bounce off, right? So this is your resistance. Of course we couldn't pump up here. All of these radials are overlapping each other. This is such hard resistance, you could never get through that. So where does price action go? It has to move between. It's like water being squeezed between the two toughest parts, right? It's being squeezed into a price action between these two. And then, if we just kind of think about it, it's going to spill out this way. Why? Why would it spill out this way? Because, first of all, it might lean a bit. It might lean a bit over like this. But you might catch one of these verticals up, and then you're also going to have these radials coming out still from this point, and it's going to be able to walk up them, right? And if you ever get above, okay, I'm making a mess. If we ever get above this $55,000 level, right? You see this, mid 50s. Just say we have like radials going through here, right? Something like that. And then we have radials coming out like this. If you ever get into this region, like above the mid 50s, then you're going to have so much room. You're going to have so much room to blast off. I mean, unless we come across another, radial origin point somewhere, you can almost imagine that this price action is just flowing like water. We can already see it's getting trapped in this area. It didn't go down here, and it didn't go up here, right? So this is the path that we have to deal with. And so it's going through this way. And if you think of this kind of like a fan that's like blowing air out, right? And this is a fan that's blowing air out. They're both blowing air right now into this direction. And so which direction do you think the air is going to go? Right? Up here. Up here. And unless there's another radial pushing back, which then rejects it, because it could happen, right? That we could find out that there's another radial in this area, and it might be, blowing out air and pushing it into this direction. And of course, we can't go backwards, so we can only go here or here after this. But it does suggest that we're going to get to this $50,000 point because we're already getting above this fan. Do you see my Do you see my concept? I know it's extremely sloppy, but this is the type of original thinking that I'm trying to bring here. I can't give you any specifics. I can't give you the math or the serial logic on it. I can only give you the lateral, kind of creative, kind of visual artist, kind of conceptual, backdrop that I'm seeing. And if others could fill in the details and let me know what you think about it, that would be amazing. But until then, that was your alpha for the day. Stay safe, guys, and happy trading. Oh, and by the way, just as a thought problem, we might consider that when, one radial goes vertical and the price action is directly over it, that might be the most risky time for it because potentially you could have, for example, if this is putting out a wind, right? Like it's just having pressure on the price. And if we are not able to pump and kind of catch basically the wind to push us up and over, then there is the possibility that with a insufficiently, without a good push up, this pressure over here could potentially push us down, and then we could start chopping down this way, right? Before we plummet. And that would be why capitulation might look like something like this. You might consider there was a radial right here, all right? And let's say that there was another radial, somewhere, and it was just pushing the price action to chop down until it got sufficiently far away from this radial that it could pump on its own, right? Or it was lifted up by something else. But again, this is all just hypothetical. But you do see in this case, right, there might have been some type of radial like this, right? You can just imagine something like that. And let's say that there was another kind of like hidden pressure up here, just resistance, right? Overhead resistance. And when we pumped up, it just wasn't sufficient to break because we're now the closest we've ever been to this resistance. It just wasn't enough to break it. And so it got pushed almost straight down. And it had to catch on this radial, push up. And then when it walked up that radial, it broke down again to the next radial until it was able to catch itself. Do you see? So technically where we are in price action is probably one of the most dangerous spots. And that's why I think that $46,000 is such an important level to get to. And if you just think about it in terms of these radials, it's the crossover spot. It's the crossover spot where you're now sufficiently high enough that you're not going to be slapped down by this one. Because this one is the one that can slap you down. This one is pushing you up. And so the further, the more energy you have to get away from this one, right? It means that you're already starting to get into a zone where this one's pushing you sideways, not down. Just think about it as support and resistance. You don't have to think about it in these abstract ways. But if we can overcome that resistance just a little bit longer and get to that $46,000, $47,000 area, we start getting pushed sideways by this one while we're being pushed up by this one. And that, of course, is going to take us on this type of diagonal upwards. But if we remain just where we are right now, and if instead of getting to the side of this pressure, right, getting where we're kind of deflecting some of its energy to the right, but we're just taking the full brunt of it down, or pretty far down, then it's really a war between these two areas right now. It's really a war. One is pushing this way, one is pushing this way, and time is pushing to the side. So the average should be perpendicular assuming that they have equal pressure, which we don't know that. We don't know that. But assuming they have equal pressure, the average should be perpendicular to them and take us into this $46,000 region, which then we can have a chance to start building up. But I just want to point out again, like as long as we're vertical over this one can slap us down and we can chop down just like, here and just like here. So it is a risky area, and that's why even if you're using this type of concept, don't be overconfident. It's just a concept, right? It's just a concept. Okay, guys.